hello again, everyone, from my perspective. It's a pleasure for me to present the work that we have done together so it's a shared work between the Laboratory for Applied Mechanical Design and the Center for Teaching Support. And well, you already named the title of our publication. Our interest here was to investigate the learning of professional skills by students by their work in team-based projects. I will put in the chat if I find.
I can do it, Cyril.
Okay, sorry. Okay, now I found everything again. So there will be one poll, exactly. There will be one question, a set of questions where you can all participate. You can access it through this link that Cécile just shared.
Sorry, I didn't share it yet. Let me just redo this because.
Yeah, you send it to me.
Exactly.
Well, that Cécile will share right now. You can access the platform and vote when time will come. Okay, thank you, Cécile. So let's get started. Actually, I want to get you a glimpse of what you should learn or what you should be convinced about by the end of this presentation. So let me just start with my key messages. So I hope that by the end of this presentation, you will be convinced that professional skills are important for engineers and scientists, that there are self-assessment tools available that can measure and evaluate the learning of these skills, that this widespread belief that we have that students can learn professional skills just by practice is rather unrealistic, but explicit consideration of professional skills is an effective way to support learning. And finally, simple changes can already have important impact, so there's no need to go for a major curriculum redesign to already consider professional skills today. Okay, but before you know all of this, let me recap and step back. So obviously, we want to think about what is the job of engineers. And here I made a quite brutal simplification. I hope no one takes offense, but the core idea is that engineers are at an interface between people and physics or technology, and they need to work in between this interface. And in order to do this, they need to, of course, have a certain technological background. They need to know domain-specific skills, so depending on their engineering degree. But they also need project management and professional skills, in particular, to manage this interface. And in particular, in the light of more development of machine intelligence, probably these skills will become even more important than they are already today. There are two concepts I will keep talking about. One is professional skills and the other is projects. So I want to take 2 slides to just wrap up what we consider as professional skills and projects. So professional skills are quite a wide term. Sometimes they're also referred to as transferable, 21st century, soft skills. And behind this term, we have communication skills, negotiation, persuasion, planning, risk assessment, working in teams, interprofessional competence, perceptiveness, and many more words, sometimes with overlapping concepts, sometimes different concepts. But whatever the definition, in a broad sense, they should be taught in engineering curricula. At least this is what accreditation bodies all around the world have already stated in their programs. But if we look at what graduates get away with once they enter into the professional life, we see that there's a gap compared to employers' expectations. And this was measured by an alumni survey performed here, for instance, at EPFL in 2017. Now there's this idea, if we look at how it's been thought so far, so there's this idea that team-based projects are seen as a good way to include the development and the learning of these skills in current curricula. And the other important aspect, if we want to consider basically to evaluate whether students have learned anything, we need to know that assessing professional skill is extremely difficult in general. And it's even more difficult because we don't really have good standardized tools to assess it. So it's a challenge. And as a consequence, it's not really done yet in the curriculum and in courses. So the other aspect, of course, is projects. Projects come in very many flavors. They trigger different ideas behind people's mind. It can refer to project-based learning. It can be a capstone project, semester projects, in-course, interdisciplinary, master thesis, or also extracurricular activity are referred to as projects. In our work, we have focused on team-based projects and two types of projects, in-course and capstone projects. What we refer to as in-course projects are also called mini projects at EPFL sometimes. These are short projects, typically 4 or 5 weeks, that have a very precise thematic that can be understood sometimes a bit as a longer guided exercise. They're always in parallel of traditional courses, and they are typically evaluated with a single report at the end of the project. Whereas capstone projects are a project that have a longer duration and that aim to have students work on highly open-ended questions. Most of the time, there are a few classes in parallel to the project, and then the evaluation is done with one or several reports and presentations. And within this frame, we had 3 questions that we wanted to address. We wanted to know which professional skills do students learn. We wanted to see how we can assess those skills and whether we could assess any change in skill. And we also wanted to see whether we could relate these results with certain characteristics of the project that we have investigated in order to basically derive guidelines on how to, or what methods work best for developing those skills. We've used one single instrument in our work. I mean, one major instrument, which is the Interprofessional Project Management Questionnaire. It's already been presented partially a few times in these Coffee and Learn sessions. It was developed by Marc Laperouza and Roland Tormey. And it's basically a self-efficacy belief assessment questionnaire that covers 5 domains, which are planning, ethical sensitivity, risk assessment, communication, and interprofessional competence. And it's a 24 items questionnaire, and the questionnaire in the form of I'm good at da da da. The students, they could do the questionnaire online, and then we have set up basically a semi-automated report generation flow that would then send the results to the students by email. It's important to note that this is a standardized tool, so it's domain unspecific, and it has been statistically validated for consistency. I mean, because we've asked our students to ask this questionnaire multiple times, I also want you to get your hands on the question. And for this, I propose that some sort of small interactive activity through this polling system that Cécile sent before. And here the idea is that we'll go through 5 questions from the IPMQ. So you basically have 5 levels to answer, which basically go from strongly disagree to strongly agree on a scale from 1 to 5. And I want you to, as you answer these questions, I want you to note what you vote so that in the end you can calculate your average score. So basically it's summing the 1s, the 2s, the 3s, the 4s that you have, and then dividing by 5, you get your score. Then there will be a question on your average score. And in the end, I also want you to try to guess which factor these questions are related to. So as a reminder, the factors are planning, risk assessment, communication, ethical sensitivity, and interprofessional competence. So if there's no question on the polling, I suggest we the poll session. Yes, okay. So I think, yes, it's live. So you should be able to answer this question, whether you feel that I'm good at clarifying how likely it is that something will go wrong with a project. I'll let a few seconds for you to do that. Okay. So 5 more seconds. Or does anyone have problems connecting to the platform? Maybe we can troubleshoot
Maybe I can
that.
repost the URL for those who arrived just after. So this is the URL, and the code to join the session is here.
Okay, I think we have our maximum answer rate right now. So I'm going to close the. Okay, great. So we had 10 answers. People mostly between neither agree or disagree, agree, or strongly agree. With respect to the, I mean, this is kind of expected answer, type of answers that we expect. So let's continue. We have 5 of those, so let's continue. Here's the next one. So here it's about, I'm good at identifying how much damage or trouble may be caused by something going wrong with a project. Okay, we have our 10 answers, so let's close the poll. Aha, slightly different picture. And so next question will be, when working on a project, I'm good at estimating the likelihood and potential impact of something going wrong with the project. Ooh, now we have 1 more answer. Okay. I don't comment each question, but there will be, I think the average question is more interesting. So here, also the next question is, I'm good at identifying what action should be taken to minimize or alleviate something going wrong with a project. Okay, and I closed the poll. And finally, I'm good at recognizing that other team's member definition of what it means for something to go wrong may be different from my own. Okay, and here we also have our answers. Okay. Very interesting. I mean, there on all these questions, there was a dominant answer, D, which is agree. But there were slightly different distributions. So I hope you've taken notes of your different scores. So you can sum the different values and then divide by 5, which should get you a score for this factor. So all these questions come from a single factor of this questionnaire. And the idea is here, you can, I don't want you to tell me your exact score, but I want you to, with respect to these, levels, tell me where you're located at. So are you above this level or between these two, or below 3.37, 3.34. And if it's too complicated to calculate, you can also skip the question. Okay, I'll give you 10 more seconds for the very few that need a bit of training. Okay. Aha. So it's a very interesting result. Let me briefly explain. So I mean, you understood probably how these questions are built. You have different kind of questions, and then we build a score. And it's always interesting to compare with respect to others. So these are self-assessment tools. They're not absolute measure, but they're comparative measures. So those that answered answer A, so above 3.74, you actually perform better. I mean, you have a score that is higher on this topic than the 40 professional, experienced professional that we have asked to answer these questions. So obviously here we have a large share of the audience, which seems highly expert in this factor. And then we have a 40% share, which is below C. So we have which is above 3.34, but below this. This is the average score that so the 3.34 is the average score of our bachelor students. And so we also have some which answered lower than our bachelor students, in average, of course. I don't know who's who. All the polls are anonymous in case you are now a bit in a panic. And finally, also probably very interesting, maybe you've recognized which factor these questions were associated with. Okay, great. Good. Yeah, we have a large share of, so this is the only question where there is a correct answer. All the others, no answer is particularly correct, but here there is one, and it is B. So all the questions are related with risk assessment. And you've seen that that we cover with this different question, different aspect of the risk. So there's the risk, the consequences, the likelihood, but also basically the risk of misunderstanding is in that case also included in this factor. Okay, with this poll, I think you all have a bit of better understanding of how this questionnaire is set up. So let us continue into what our results and how we got them. So our methods for evaluating the effects of different projects is a very simple pre-post study design. So we included 2 bachelor courses that had in-course project, 1 master course, which is a design project, so similar to capstone project. We also included, I told you, professionals. I removed this. I won't talk about it in this presentation, but there's more detail in the paper if you want. So the 2 kind of projects that we have are quite common, at least here at EPFL. So the bachelor courses are large classes. We have 30 to 50 students per teaching assistant. The students have on-demand meetings, so they have to ask teaching assistants for help if they need. Whereas in the master course, it's a totally different approach. Here we have 8 students per teaching assistant. We have weekly meetings that are set up. And there are also specific classes on project management and risk assessment that are also part of the assessment of the course and of the project. If we look in terms of timeline, the bachelor students, they had basically 3 weeks to answer the pre-questionnaire. And then on week 10, they started their project. Week 14, they handed in the report with respect to that project. And then they had 5 more weeks to answer The IPMQ post questionnaire basically was open until the exam. Here for the bachelor course, what is worth noting is that we covered in a total 306 students, but we only had 168 answers to the pre-questionnaire and 47 answers to the post-questionnaire. So of course, a limitation of our study, which I will cover a bit more later. The master course is a much smaller course. Here it's more complicated, so that there are 3 reports on week 3, week 10, week 17, and then they had a presentation on week 14. So we see it's much more followed and intense course. The pre-questionnaire was open between week 3 and week 5, and the post-questionnaire was open between week 17 and week 19. Of course, people are familiar with the 14-week semester. Well, this is obviously after the semester is ended and we're into the exam period. Here we have a very good response rate. So 32 pre-questionnaire, 29 post-questionnaires were answered by our masterclass. I mean, with all these answers, let's jump right into the results. So I'll present 2 results. Obviously, the results of what happened in the in-course and the result of what happened in the capstone project. The way to read this box plots is as follow. Basically, this space is separated in 2 sections. So we have at the far right, we have the total IPMQ score. So this is the average of the 24 questions. And then on the left-hand side, we have the average that the student had per factor. And then so each box represents either a pre or post questionnaire. The red triangles are the mean. Otherwise, it's a typical box plot. So we have the median, the interquartile range, and the whiskers for 1.5 interquartile range. We run, of course, statistical tests between pre and post to know if there was a significant difference in distribution. We've run this using one-sided t-tests with the hypothesis that the post questionnaire was greater than the pre-questionnaire. And we use the star notation from the Association of Psychology to indicate when there is a statistical significance. When there's no star, there's no difference in terms of statistics. Okay, so let's look at the results themselves. Here's what we see for the in-course project is basically that we don't see that much happening. The total score seems, I mean, we see there is a slight increase, but there's no statistical increase. And for other factors, it's the same. There's a statistical difference on communication and interprofessional competence. But if we look at the effect size is very roughly speaking the distance or the change in mean between the 2 distributions. We see that all the values are quite low, and all the values are, in particular, they're below 0.4. And this is a threshold in education that's been basically defined by Hattie, and which says that 0.4 is a standard educational intervention. And if you're below, you're underperforming, and if you're over, you're overperforming. So here we're clearly underperforming standard educational interventions with our in-course projects in terms of these skills that we measure here. If we look at the capstone project, luckily, our results are slightly different. So again, if we look at the total IPMQ score, here we see now that there is a strong increase. We have a statistical significant increase in total score by the students. We also see that we are above 0.4. So we have an above average educational intervention with this project. This is on one side. This is a broad gain by the students. And on the other side, we have a statistically significant gain on 2 factors, planning and risk assessment, with a large effect size, again, above 0.4. And which is interesting because, well, this is where we happen to have had specific interventions in class, and so students have been asked to comment on these topics in their reports. So what are the takeaway lessons from our results? Well, first of all, we see that there's a limited effect of in-course projects. And there's two things that we can see here. One is that it's even highlighted by the fact that we've asked students to report how many projects they worked on that particular semester, and they had about 2 other projects. So despite working on 3 projects, we see very little change. But we also asked the students in open-ended feedback questionnaire whether they learned something, and they have reported some learning there with respect to professional skills. So it also suggests that their learning might not be strong enough to be visible by our tool, the IPMQ. If we look at the capstone project here, we can clearly see that the longer and more complex projects trigger a broader learning. So this is the total IPMQ score of the students that increased. But we also see that if we have explicit teaching and feedback on specific topics, we have a strong gains in these factors. But we also showed that because this is a single course, it's not part of a project-based learning curriculum where the whole curriculum is built around project-based learning, but we were still able to have very strong and significant learning by integrating this in a single course. So we have had efficient and effective learning. And finally, we have been able to measure differences with our IPMQ. So it's effective and it's efficient because it can be semi-automatically performed and processed to evaluate professional skills, and it is thus also applicable to large-scale classes. In terms of the challenges that we had, and there were still open questions, first is the limitation in terms of participation in the bachelor courses. I mean, we cover only 55% of the students in the pre-form and 15% in the post-form. While the number might seem very, very low, especially for the post questionnaire, what we have been able to do at least is that we know that the pre-only population, so the students that answered only to the pre-questionnaire, are actually very similar to the students that answered both questionnaire. So on that side, we know that we have probably controlled or limited bias, but there's still 45% of the class that we have no clue of. And if we think of why we have such a low response rate, we have several hypotheses. Of course, we don't know what happened, but of course it's a large class, so the interaction with the teacher is kind of diluted. But there are also the age of the student and possibly lack of interest. I mean, bachelor students see their professional life as very far away. And it could also be related to the fact that the objectives and the requirements of the course are not targeted at professional skills. So professional skills are in that sense implicit in this course. The other open challenges are with respect to the IPMQ itself. And it's a bit more of a psychometrical problem. The idea here is that we know in general that there is a correlation between self-efficacy tools and performance and objective performance for disciplinary skills. But we are actually not yet sure whether this extends to professional skills, although we have no reason to believe it does not, but we have no proof that it does. And it is actually related to a specific problem of the idea of objective assessment. It's very hard to establish objective measures of these professional skills. And so it's hard to have a way to compare self-assessment and objective measures. Of course, if somehow we could develop such an objective measure in a way that it's not context specific, that would really help. But we don't have this tool yet, so we're forced to keep with this open question. There's a last point I want to address before we go into a more general discussion. You might think that I've criticized in-course projects, and before you go away with this message, I want to slightly correct this point of view. in-course projects have been primarily introduced to target disciplinary skills learning. And they're great at doing this. I just want to show you this by showing you two distribution of grades obtained by the students of these bachelor courses at their exam. Left-hand side was before Jürg Schiffmann introduced in-course projects, and right-hand side is after. And if you've done anything with grading, you recognize that we went with this double distribution to a more conventional distribution on the right. So basically, we've been able to push students that were struggling to get sufficient grades to pass the exam, actually. And this is actually a great success in itself. So we shouldn't forget this. But the idea is we want to be better. We want to be even better. And so this is the purpose of the work I presented today. So basically, that's it for my presentation. Maybe I want to make a quick break here to see if there are any questions regarding what I presented. Maybe something wasn't clear. I could clarify this. And then I suggest that we move into more of a discussions part.